Hey y'all, it's Stacy with southernbite.com. Welcome back to the kitchen. Today we're making what's arguably the most popular salad dressing recipe that we have on the site. This is my recipe for my best ranch dressing. And I didn't just throw that word best on there to get clicks. It truly is the best ranch dressing. Now, growing up, Jack was a huge ranch fan. And so I had really high standards that I had to meet when creating this recipe. And after lots of testing, this is what I came up with. And it's actually pretty easy. I'm gonna start with about 1 cup of mayonnaise. Now, if you've been following me for any period of time, you know I am a diehard Duke's Mayo fan. I love Duke's because it's super tangy, it has no sugar in it. And so that's what I recommend with this recipe, but you could certainly use another one. I would just recommend staying away from a mayonnaise that has lots of sugar, and certainly stay away from things called salad dressing. To this, I'm going to add about 1/2 cup of buttermilk. I recommend that you use low-fat buttermilk. It's sometimes a little hard to find. With all the fat that's in the mayo, you don't really need the fat, but if you can only find whole buttermilk, just get that. It'll be just fine. Now let's talk about how we're going to add some flavor to this. I choose to use dried herbs. Dried herbs are going to have a more intense flavor, and the flavor profile is actually a little different when they're dried versus when they're fresh. You can totally use fresh herbs. Keep in mind that for each measurement of dried herbs, you're going to need 3 times that in fresh herbs. So in this case, with all of our herbs, we're using about 1/2 teaspoon of each of them. So if you're going to use fresh, you're going to need about 1.5 teaspoons. So 3 times what the dried measurement is. 1/2 teaspoon of dried chives, 1/2 teaspoon of dried parsley, 1/2 teaspoon of dried dill. I'm adding a whole teaspoon of garlic powder. I've got 1/2 teaspoon of onion powder. I'm going to do about 1/2 teaspoon of salt. That looks about right. And now for an ingredient that's a little controversial, but I will tell you, if you really want the best ranch dressing, you need to include this. It's MSG. Now, MSG gets a bad rap. MSG occurs in lots of foods naturally, things like tomatoes and mushrooms and yogurt. If you have a sensitivity to it, it's totally fine to leave it out, but this gives this dressing a flavor boost that is just so much better with it. Again, if you have a sensitivity, just leave it out. Now, in the grocery store, you may be able to find a generic version of MSG. Most commonly, though, you're going to find what's called accent, and that's all it is. It's created in a process using corn fermentation. It adds so much flavor. I think it's a crucial ingredient here. I'm using about 1/2 teaspoon of MSG. Now, when I was developing this recipe, I made a batch with it and a batch without it. And across the board, everyone picked the version that had the MSG in it. Like I said, it just adds a flavor boost that makes this so much better. All right, and I've got about 1/2 teaspoon of white vinegar. Once this is all whisked together, that's it. We're gonna cover this, pop it in the fridge. You can put it in an airtight container. Let it rest for about an hour. That's gonna give it time for all that flavor to meld and everything to get happy in there. And then you're done. It's great in the fridge for 5 to 7 days. It's a perfect salad dressing, a great dip. It's just good all the way around. Folks, you can find this full, super easy recipe by heading over to the website, southernbite.com, and just search for Best Ranch Dressing. Y'all enjoy.